we fight fair. We kind of set down some ground rules, probably in the first couple of years that we were married, that we would not fight in public.
I don't remember the ground rules, but yeah, that was one.
We wouldn't fight in public. That's a ground rule.
Yeah.
We try not to ever bring up anything in the past. We don't want, if there's an argument today, we deal with the argument today.
We never walk away during fights.
We don't let it go. I mean, if we've got an issue or a problem, we have to settle it right then and there.
When a person walks away, that tells the other person, like, this isn't worth it to me. I'm not willing to stay here and invest my time in making it right.
We might be arguing and fighting, but I love you, and I want to work this out.
Listen to each other and respect each other enough to know that they have feelings and an opinion, and it's important to them, I think. In a marriage, you're constantly thinking about, what can I do for him? And he's constantly thinking about me, what can I do for her? Putting ourselves, kind of second when it comes to each other.
We'll start to get upset about something, and then we're like, really, on the grand scheme of things, this is really a big deal.
All right, good morning, Livewire Church. Good to see you guys this morning. So, I want to start off with this statement. Marriage does not work. It doesn't work. Marriage does not work. Now, for some of you that maybe don't go to church on a regular basis, and this may be even one of the reasons that you don't even like church, one of the big reasons that you don't even like going to church or even being a part of a church or whatever, because you see that marriage doesn't work, and you see that you're just kind of like, well, as far as I know, from what I've heard, preachers talking about as far as God is the one that created marriage, and it's in the Bible, and so you see all of that, and so because you know that marriage doesn't work, that's one of the reasons you're just like, well, that's why I don't even want to step foot into church. I don't even want to go to church, because marriage has to do with God, and marriage has to do with the Bible, and it doesn't work, so why should I even be there? Why should I even go? Yes, you heard me right, and now that I've got your attention, marriage, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. It doesn't work if we're doing what everybody else does. That's why marriage doesn't work. That's why we have 1 and 2 marriages that end in divorce. That's why there are people that, again, that are unchurched, that don't go to church on a regular basis, that they don't even want to come to church because they see this idea of marriage, or this is one of the reasons that they see this idea of marriage, and it doesn't work, and it's of God, and so whatever God wants for my life, that must not work either. So I don't even want anything to do with church. And that's what we found out last week, is marriage truly doesn't work if we're going to do what everybody else does. If we're going to adopt the ideologies and just the beliefs and the opinions of what everybody else says, then I'm telling you, your marriage will not make it. Or even if it does make it, it'll make it from the standpoint of you're sticking together just because of the children. You won't like each other. You won't, you definitely won't love each other. You won't be, you won't be lovey-dovey. You won't be building that relationship. It won't be thriving. It won't be growing, simply because we've taken something that God has created. We've taken something that God has instituted, something so beautiful, that if we'll honor God and we'll say, God, this is what you have, this is how you've organized marriage, this is how you've created it to look like, and all of that. If we just take our own, if we put our own ideas on it, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. It's not going to thrive the way that God wants it to thrive. So again, if you missed last week, definitely we kicked off this series from this day forward. We're talking about 5 fail-proof commitments to safeguard our marriage. And so if you missed last week, definitely go to our website, wiredalive.com/media. The message Seek God is there, because that, first and foremost, before we even get into anything else, that's what we need. We need God in the center of our relationship. So maybe you're thinking about getting married, you're in a serious relationship, or maybe you've been married for some time, and maybe up to this point, God has been nowhere in the picture. And I just want to challenge you, and I just want to encourage you to get God in the picture. Maybe up to this point, God hasn't been in the picture, but from this day forward, God can be. And you can see your relationship succeed. You can see your marriage thrive and be everything that you dreamed it could be, and even beyond that, even much more than that. And so this morning, we're talking about, as we continue the series, week 2, we're talking about fighting fair. Fighting fair. See, the reality is this, is every couple fights. And yeah, you can say that you don't and whatever. Every couple fights, but not every couple fights fair. You know, some hit below the belt. Some are biting. Some throw rabbit punches. Some throw kidney punches. Some hit on the brake. You know what I'm saying? Some people, I mean, some couples, some men, some women, I mean, it's a battle zone when you walk into that house. If you were a fly on the wall, for some of you, it may be a battle zone. If somebody was to be a fly on the wall, it's a battle zone in your house. You're just constantly at each other's throats and constantly criticizing and constantly just bickering and fighting and all of these other things. The reality, again, is that every couple does fight. But not every couple. In fact, I would say a lot of couples do not fight fair. So what is it that couples fight about? I mean, what do you guys fight about? Let me ask you this. Who knows the biggest reason that couples fight? Anybody know? Go ahead, take a guess. All right. I heard somebody say it. Yes, money. Couples, the thing that couples fight about the most is money, finances. Oh, why did you buy that? You're spending too much money. Couples fight about money. I mean, that's the biggest thing that brings division and brings separation, that starts to create arguments and starts to create the bickering and all those things. Some other things that couples fight about, they fight about the house chores, the domestic responsibilities. You know, who's going to clean the dishes? Who's going to do the laundry? And guys, I just want to newsflash in case you did not know this. Your wife, more than likely, she's working full-time. More than likely, she's got a career like you do. So you can help around the house, gentlemen. It's not like it used to be where as husbands, you know, we went off to work and we went off to our career and we were bringing home the bacon. We were working hard and working our 9 to 5 and bringing home the paycheck while our wives stayed home and she was raising the kids. She was cooking and cleaning and all of those stuff. We're in the 21st century, friends and gentlemen especially. We're in the 21st century. And chances are your wife has a career just like you do. Chances are she's working a full-time job just like you. Or if you're in a serious relationship, she's working a full-time job just like you. And she's probably going to need that, or he's probably going to need that even as you step into marriage. So the responsibilities of the chores, the domestic responsibilities, couples fight about that because I always clean the laundry, I always do the dishes, and I always, and there's fighting about that. There's also fighting about having no voice. You know, couples fight about not having a voice in the relationship, in the marriage, with the children, or with the decisions of everyday life. And so the wife may feel like, or the husband may feel like, I have no say. Like, I share my opinion, I give my idea, but it's totally discounted. It's totally discredited. And so we fight about that. We fight about the in-laws. We fight about in-laws, right? And I do have to apologize because I joke, that is a joke, but my mother-in-law is in here, and I have the best, honestly. I've got the best in-laws. I've heard horror stories of other in-laws, and I've got some pretty awesome in-laws. So, and my wife does too, in my parents. She's got some awesome in-laws as well. But we fight about the in-laws and just what maybe our parents want or their parents want and those sorts of things. And we fight about phone use, especially in this technology age, and especially because our smartphones, they can do just about anything. And it's so crazy because we can't even really, in a sense, get away from work anymore because our work is on our smartphone too. And so we're getting emails, and we're getting phone calls, or we're getting texts, and we're looking at Facebook and all. And so couples fight about how much you're on your phone. You're always on the phone. You're always on Facebook. I mean, don't you have time for me? Couples are fighting about. Couples fight about nothing at all. And some things are just, just stupid stuff. Like, they don't even know. At the end of it, it's like they've just all this yelling and all this screaming and all this bickering and all this fighting and everything. And then at the end of it, it's like, what were we even fighting about? We don't even know what we're fighting about. Sometimes we're just fighting about nothing at all, and we're just angry, and we're just guy or husband and wife are just going at it, and we're just fighting, and we don't even know what we're fighting for or what we're fighting about. Nothing at all. And some couples fight about the need of attention or for attention. Couples also fight about time with the kids. Sometimes, this kind of plays into, or a lot of times with the husbands, and it seems like, mom may be always going to the kids' soccer games or football games or baseball games, and dad's just kind of chilling at home out on the couch watching the game on TV. Nothing wrong with that, but, she's wanting you to spend time with the kids, or maybe she's been home all day with the kids. And you come home, and sure, you're tired, and you're wanting to kind of relax and everything, but, she wants a little break because she's been home with the kids all day, and she would like for you to spend time with the kids, and there's that fighting, there's that tension, there's that conflict. And yes, couples fight about sex, all right? And actually, we're going to talk about that more next week. You don't want to miss next week. We're going to talk about sex, baby. So you don't want to miss next week, and we'll be talking about that a little bit more next week in our message, Having Fun. We'll dive into that a little bit. So couples are fighting, and we have this bickering, we have these conflicts, we have these situations that are going on, and we're at each other's throats, we're bickering, and all this stuff is going on. And the reality is that most conflict, the root of most conflict is actually selfishness. I mean, think about all those things that we fight about. The root of a lot of those things, the root of most of those things is selfishness. And it could be selfishness on both sides. It could be, maybe the wife's cleaning dishes after already making dinner. She's cleaning dishes, and the husband's just kind of sitting on the couch, and she's just like, well, I made dinner. I mean, at least he could clean the dishes, and so she's getting a little jealous and a little selfish because she wants to be on the couch, but then at the same time, he's also being selfish because he could help clean the dishes. I mean, she cooked dinner. He could help clean the dishes, but instead he's just like chilling out. I had my meal. I'm going to chill out on the couch. And so he's being a little selfish. And the reality is this: you take any one of those situations, phone use, money, any one of those situations, and more than likely at the root of it is going to be selfishness. Now, Jesus talks about marriage, and he actually is recounting what Moses wrote about back in Genesis. Now, if you're here this morning and you struggle with as far as like the Old Testament, like did God really split the Red Sea? I mean, did that really happen? Or did Noah really build this huge boat 3 times the size of a football field, or 3 football field sizes? I mean, did Noah really do that? Did he really build? If you struggle with all that, I get it. I mean, it's like, some of that stuff is just, it's like it baffles your mind, like some of the things that happen that we read, some of these stories. And if you don't believe it, let me just tell you this. Just a little side note. This is for free. You get this for free. But just a little side note. Jesus he refers many times back to the Old Testament, and we're going to see this he's going to refer back to Genesis, back to the beginning of time, creation and marriage. And here's the thing: because Jesus believes it, that's why I believe it. And here's why. Because anybody that could predict their own death and predict their resurrection and then pull it off, hey, I'm down with that. I'll believe anything you say. I mean, anybody that could pull that stuff off, fine. And that's what Jesus did. Well, because Jesus believed in creation, because Jesus believes in creation, I believe it as well. And so here's what he says, and he's recounting Moses' words back in Genesis. This is Mark 10, verse 6 through 8. He says, but God made them male and female in the beginning at creation. That's why a man will leave his father and mother and remain united with his wife. Now, gentlemen, some of you are mama's boys. And some of you, this is the price of admission right here. I mean, this was worth the price of admission, which was free anyways. But this is worth the price of admission, leaving your father and your mother. You got to leave, and you got to join to your wife. You got to leave, mama's boy. You got to join your wife. All right, notice. That's why a man will leave his father and mother and remain united with his wife, and the two will be one. So they are no longer two, but one. The interesting thing about this is, here's the first two human beings on the face of the earth, because Jesus, again, he's reminding us of how creation started and what happened with Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve, the first two people on the face of this earth, they're the first man, first woman, and they get married. They're husband and wife. They're now husband and wife. And so Moses is recounting the story, talking about the story, how it all happened, and says, he had to leave, which he didn't have a father and mother, but the idea was obviously future generations. So he had to leave and join himself to his wife. And it says that the two became one. Now think about that for a moment. The two people become one. Now they didn't have this really weird thing where they just kind of connected to each other and they walked like this, everywhere they went, they were conjoined, if you will. No, that didn't happen. Okay, so get that out of your head. But it's an idea that these two people became one. Now think about that, because we're talking about that in light of selfishness. Because if you take Adam and Eve, they lived in a perfect world. See, the fall hadn't happened yet. Adam and Eve hadn't sinned and disobeyed God yet. So the fall hadn't happened. They lived in a perfect world, and they were perfect people. So, of course, it was easy for the two of them to become one because they were perfect. I mean, everything they did was perfect, and everything they said, it was perfect. The problem that you and I have today is because of the fall, because of Adam and Eve, we want to punch their lights out. Because of them, because they sinned, because they disobeyed God, sin entered into the world, and now you and I, we live in an imperfect and broken world, and each one of us are broken. And that's why we need Jesus in our lives. That's why we need God's influence. We need the influence of His Word in our lives, because we're broken people. I mean, you don't even have to have all of the baggage. If you have all this baggage in your life, you don't even have to have that. We're all broken. None of us are perfect. And so now, when we read this and we say, what? You want us to operate as one? That's not happening. Why? Because husband has his personality, wife has her personality, husband has his ideas, wife has her ideas, husband has his beliefs, wife has her beliefs. And now you're saying you want us to bring that together? Oh, Josh, that's not happening. Josh, in a perfect world, that would be the case. In a perfect world, I could see that happening. But that ain't happening. That ain't happening in today's world. That ain't happening in our culture. And that is the challenge. And I acknowledge that. That is the challenge. But the challenge is here's what we have to understand, and we have to just come to grips with, so to speak. And if you're not married, one day you want to be married, or even if you're presently married, here's the thing that we have to understand, and this is just relationships in general. The thing that we have to understand is that we are selfish by nature. We are selfish by nature. So what are we always going to want? We're going to want our way. I want my way. The husband's going to want his way. The wife is going to want her way. Naturally, that's what we're drawn to. And so if we will acknowledge that before we go into marriage, or if we will acknowledge that maybe we haven't up to this point in our marriage, if we will acknowledge that now that selfishness is working against us, then that will help us to fight fair. That will help us in our conflict. Because we'll be able to pinpoint, wait, hold up, you know what? I'm being selfish here. Hey, honey, you did cook dinner and you don't need to clean the dishes. That needs to be something I'm doing. Let me help out with that. Baby, you put the laundry in the wash and everything's dried and ready to be folded and put away. You know what? You clean. Let me put the clothes away. Let me help out with that. We have to acknowledge that we do live in a broken world, and we are broken people, and that we need God's influence in our life. And the thing that is going to work against us over and over and over, you and I will never get to the place where we will never be selfish. That always comes naturally to us. We always want our way. We always want to do our thing. We always want it to be our idea. And even if we think we don't, we will manipulate other people. And we'll, basically kind of say, oh, no, yeah, we compromised. We talked about it. But in all reality, we just kind of manipulated the people around us, or we manipulated our spouse into agreeing with our idea. So the two become one. I acknowledge that's a challenge. That is a very hard thing. But the reality is this, is that it is very possible to have that in our marriage, in our relationships, and it is also very rewarding. It's very, very rewarding. So when we talk about fights and when this whole idea of fighting fair, we have to acknowledge, first of all, that we're selfish by nature. Okay, so and even along those lines, James kind of talks about this in James in the New Testament. James writes this in James 4:1. He says, "What causes fights and quarrels?" Now, we think of kind of those being the same words, but actually the fight aspect is fights here is more physical, where the quarreling is more of verbally fighting. So you got the physical fighting, you got the verbal fighting, and in a lot of relationships, what's usually happening is that verbal fighting, that verbal interaction, and that verbal disagreement, and that verbal disagreement becomes an argument, and then voices are being raised, and then I don't even like you, and you're just a pain in my butt, and I can't believe you did that. Temperature starts rising. That's where, and then in some relationships, there's actually the physical aspect where there's actually real fighting, where maybe the wife's hitting on the husband, or in other cases where the husband is hitting on the wife. And so there is the fights and there's the quarreling. But notice what James says here. He says, "What causes fights and quarrels among you? Aren't they caused by selfish desires that fight to control you?" Notice that. Because you take all the fighting that's going on in the world, and at the root of that is going to be that person's or that nation's selfish ambition. That person's selfish desire. They want to do something. They want something that they don't presently have. And since I don't have it, I want it, and I want my way, and I want my way right away. I'm going to go get it. I'm going to do whatever I have to do to go get it. I'm going to move people over. I'm going to run people over. I'm going to trample people over. Whatever it is that I've got to do to get my way. If I've got to manipulate my wife, if I've got to manipulate my husband, my boyfriend, my girlfriend, I've got to manipulate whoever to get my way. I'm going to get my way. But James says the reason why there's all this fighting in our world, and specifically as we talk about relationships, the reason why there's all this fighting is because not only do we realize that we're selfish, we're proud to be selfish. Like, yeah, man, I'm going to get my way. I'm going to do my thing. I'm going to get what I want. We're proud to be selfish. And the reality is this, is that the selfish desires fight to control us. And so since the other person is fighting against that because we want our way, then now we fight with them. So you got this downward spiral that's happening, that when we turn and give ourselves over to selfishness, that selfishness is now controlling us. It's fighting to control us. And if we give ourselves to it, then we're going to fight with whoever. We're going to fight with our spouse. We're going to fight with our children. We're going to fight with our boss or with employees. We're going to fight with whoever when we don't get our way. When we don't get our way. When we don't get what we want. When our idea isn't taken, we will fight. James also says verse 16, drop down, or actually chapter 3, verse 16. He says, "For wherever there is jealousy and selfish ambition, there you will find disorder and evil of every kind." Notice that. He said, wherever you're going to find jealousy, wherever it is that you find somebody that says, "Hey, I don't have that, and I'm jealous that that person has that. I'm jealous that my wife is like this. I'm jealous that my husband is like this. I'm jealous that my husband has a career and I don't. I'm jealous that, whatever, fill in the blank. I'm jealous." And notice, for wherever there is jealousy and selfish ambition, there you will find disorder of every kind. Disorder and evil of every kind. So we wonder, well, why is there so much division? Why is there so much disorder in my family and in my marriage or in my relationship? Why is there so much disorder? And more than likely, if we'll just examine ourselves, which we'll come back to that in a few moments, if we'll just examine ourselves, there's probably a hint of selfishness there. There's probably some selfishness there that is fighting to control us. And as it fights to control us and we give in, then we fight with whoever, fight with our spouse. We fight to get our way. Now notice this. Look what James does here. He says, for wherever there is jealousy and selfish ambition, there you will find disorder and evil of every kind. And he goes on, verse 17, but the wisdom from above, talking about God's wisdom, talking about the wisdom that God wants to bring into our lives. He says the wisdom from above. You remember we talked about Solomon last week. Solomon loved God. He followed, obeyed God. And so God came to him in a dream one day and he said, Solomon, ask for whatever you want and I'll give it to you. Solomon said, God, give me understanding to be the king of this great nation of yours. And God says, you know what, Solomon, I'm going to give you understanding, but I'm also going to give you something even more than that. I'm going to give you wisdom because, Solomon, not only do you want the ability to know what to do, to understand what to do, but, Solomon, you need to know how to do it, wisdom. You need to know how to do that thing. And so God gives Solomon understanding and wisdom, and James is pinpointing the very same thing. He's saying, you know, we've got this selfishness that just comes so easy for us. And actually the opposite of selfishness, because selfishness is actually leading to foolishness. You'll see this in a few moments. But selfishness leads to foolishness. And the opposite of foolishness is wisdom. See, what we need instead of giving into our selfish nature, what we need instead of getting our way all the time and doing our thing and fulfilling our ideas, having our way, what we need is a little bit of wisdom. And so James says, but the wisdom from above is, first of all, notice the difference between operating in selfishness and wisdom. He says the wisdom from above is, first of all, pure. It's also peace-loving. It's gentle at all times, not selfishness. I mean, disorder and evil of every kind. It's gentle at all times and willing to yield to others. When do you ever see a selfish person yield to somebody else? It's like, me yield to you? Me submit to you? No. It's going to be my way. It's going to be my idea. It's going to be what I want. See, selfishness never yields to anybody. Selfishness never comes under the authority of anybody. Selfishness just says, nope, it's all about me. It's all about me. The world revolves around me, if you didn't know. Okay? Revolves around me. I'm serious. It's also peace-loving, gentle at all times, and willing to yield to others. It is full of mercy. Wisdom is full of mercy and the fruit of good things. Remember, we were talking about selfishness, selfish ambition, right, and jealousy. What does that lead to? That actually leads to evil and disorder of all kinds. Evil of all kinds. Notice what wisdom leads to. Wisdom leads to the fruit of good deeds. See, you want your marriage to be blessed. You want your relationship to be blessed. You want to be able to fight fair. Then what we have to do is we've got to lay selfishness aside and we've got to let God's wisdom come in. Because you and I, we need God's wisdom. So he says it is full of mercy and the fruit of good deeds. It shows no favoritism and is always sincere. So we have to acknowledge that we're selfish by nature. Now, here's the other thing that we have to acknowledge. We have to acknowledge that we're selfish by nature, okay? That comes easy to us. So that's kind of working against us. So that means we've got to work at putting that selfishness aside with wisdom. The other thing that we have to acknowledge is because we are selfish by nature, and here's where that forgiveness and here's where that bearing with each other comes in. Because we're selfish by nature, friends, we will not always get it right. We won't always get it right. And we've got to be able to forgive each other when we don't get it right. We've got to be able to bear with each other when we don't get it right. We've got to be able to understand, especially as we're talking about a relationship and we're talking about a marriage, we've got to be able to understand that we love each other and that we want the best for each other. And so in the times when we don't get it right, let's work through it. But let's not get into this big fight and say, oh, well, you never, oh, well, you always. It's amazing to me. It's amazing to me how we see those extremes, like you never and you always. We see those extremes so often in teenagers, right? And we're just like, oh, there's my son, there's my daughter. It's always, it's never, it's you always, you never. And we adults do the same thing. We do the same thing. You never clean the dishes. You never take me out on a date anymore. You never get off that phone. You're always spending money. I mean, is it always? Is it never? But what we do is we're just upset about a situation and we get into this big, huge fight over it. But the reality is this: selfishness is a big part of it. We got to be able to, again, deal with that selfishness, bring some wisdom in. But the reality is we're not always going to get it right. So what do we do when we don't always get it right? Or what do we do when there's conflict? Or how do we fight fair? How do we fight fair? How do we step into the ring and we fight fair? Well, first of all, no low blows, no biting, no rabbit punches, no kidney punches, no hitting on the brake. Okay, you ready? Fight. How do we do this? Well, actually, James, we're going to go back to James here, James chapter 1, and James gives just a 3-step process that is so awesome just for our life in general, and it relates to relationships, relates to marriage. James chapter 1, verse 19, notice this. James says, remember this, my dear brothers and sisters. Remember this, men and women. Remember this, husbands and wives. Remember this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and should not get angry easily, or should be slow to anger. Now, just look at that list for just a second. Every person should be quick to listen. What often happens? We're slow to listen, right? I mean, he's saying, here's wisdom, right? We're talking about, God, give me wisdom. I want to be able to have conflict resolution. And even when we fight, all right, and when we're talking about fighting fair, the object or the goal that we're going for is not victory. Like, oh, yes, I beat my wife. Oh, yes, I beat my husband. The object or the goal is conflict resolution. Let's resolve the conflict that we have with each other. Let's resolve this problem. Let's resolve this issue. And a lot of times what happens is instead of being quick to listen, we're actually slow to listen. Instead of being slow to speak, what are we? I mean, come on, let's be honest. We're quick to speak. We're quick to speak. And instead of being slow to anger, we're quick to get angry. So let's dive into this in the last couple minutes that we have together. Let's dive into this. How do we resolve conflict? How do we fight fair? The first thing that we've got to do is we've got to listen intently. What does that mean? Because listening to you may very well be hearing. See, there's a difference between hearing and listening. Hearing is when I'm on the couch watching the game or watching my favorite show, and Christine comes over and she says, oh, babe, I want to tell you something. This is what's going on, and I'm still watching my show, watching the game, and I'm hearing her. In other words, I hear volume. I'm hearing, but I'm not listening. See, to listen, the opposite, to listen instead of just hearing, where I'm hearing words, I'm hearing noise, I'm hearing volume and that sort of thing. The difference between hearing and listening, to listen intently, and that's why I put the word intently there. To listen intently is to give your spouse, it's to give your significant other, it's to give the other person your full, undivided attention. It's to listen closely to what they're saying. And especially when there is conflict, especially when there is a situation between you two. Because here's what happens a lot of times, is we may even be listening. We may even give our husband or our wife our full undivided attention. But once she says or he says something that gets to the point of something we don't like, once she says something we don't like, boom, we immediately stop listening, and now I'm formulating my defense. I know how I'm going to come back at that. Oh, I'm ready. Oh, just wait till you get done. I know what I'm going to say. At that point, we've shut down listening. See, to listen, and this is a challenge for us, especially in the culture that we live in, where everything is just, moving quickly, shining, and just pictures are flowing, and just things move quickly. Especially in this culture that we live in, it's so easy it's so easy for other things to take our attention away. And so what happens is, my wife, she'll say something, and or she's talking, and I'm listening, got my full undivided attention, baby. I'm here, I'm ready, I'm listening. Here we go. And I'm focused, and then she says something I don't like. And I start thinking, oh, well, I wonder why she said that. You know what, that's not right. I don't always do that, and I have done that before, and I start formulating my defense. Instead, what I need to do, and again, Let's acknowledge the challenge on it. What I need to do is listen intently, give her my full undivided attention, let her say everything that she needs to say. Chances are, friends, chances are the defense that you're trying to formulate, that you want to formulate to combat your spouse or to combat your significant other, chances are if you will listen to them entirely, if you will give them your full undivided attention, chances are there is no reason for you to bring up that defense, because you will understand why they feel the way they feel. Or you will recognize their feelings or their emotions or what it is that they're dealing with or what the problem is. Chances are you will resolve even the conflict there, or it won't even get heated, just simply by listening. Just by listening intently, giving that full undivided attention. Speaking of Solomon, one of the most wisest, actually the most wisest man next to Jesus, speaking of Solomon, he writes this. Proverbs 18:13, Solomon says, "Whoever gives an answer before he listens is stupid and shameful." Man, Solomon just laid it right out there. You wanna just give an answer before listening? Solomon says you're stupid. Now, honestly, we pretty much got to take that to the bank. Here's one of the wisest men that ever lived. Okay, if anybody knows this to be true, it would be Solomon. And so Solomon says, whoever gives an answer before listening, you're stupid and you're shameful. The second thing we've got to do, if we're going to fight fair, we've got to listen intently. The second thing that we've got to do is we got to think before we speak. Think before we speak. Think about what it is that we need to say. And gentlemen, sometimes we wrestle with this even more so, where we'll use sarcasm and we'll use, and especially the sarcasm, but then we may even be critical, right? And all that does is exacerbate the situation even more. I mean, when we're using sarcasm in the time where sarcasm doesn't need to come in, when there is a problem, when there is a conflict, when there is something that needs to be dealt with, and we're just being sarcastic, it's not appreciated at all. And so one of the things that we got to think of is, okay, what do I want to say, and how do I want to say it? How do I want to say it? Because, emotions are going on. Depending on what the fight is, emotions are high and feelings are high and things are happening. And so you say the wrong thing, and even if you didn't mean for it to come out that way, even though you didn't mean to say it that way, because you didn't take the time to think about it and say, wait, let me think about how I'm going to react to this situation. Let me think about how I'm going to react to what he said or what she said. Let's think before we speak. Let's think before we actually say the words that we're going to say. And there again, going back to the listening, if we're just hearing, then we're not going to think before we speak, and we're just going to blurt out, oh, well, here's my defense. No, you're entirely wrong. You're totally wrong. Here's my defense on that. And we're totally going to push down the person. We're totally going to shut them down, not even let them finish, not let our husband or our wife finish what they were going to say. We've got to think before we speak. Listen intently. Think before you speak. Solomon writes this in Proverbs 10:19. Sin is unavoidable when there is much talk, but whoever seals his lips is wise. See, if all we're doing is yapping our mouths, yap, 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 yap. And sometimes also, for those of us that love to talk, and sometimes, see, your spouse may be listening intently the whole time, right? But if you love to talk, man, get to the point. All right, let's not talk about this conflict for 10 minutes and come around the mountain, that 10 minutes, every minute we're coming around the mountain. Yeah, here it is, here it is. I'm going to say the same thing, I'm going to say the same thing again. We're coming around that mountain. So if you love to talk, hey, and your spouse is trying to listen, they're trying to give you your full and undivided attention, make sure that you're also using your words carefully as you share what's going on, as you share the problem, what the situation is, and all of those things. Make sure that you're getting to the point. Because again, sin is unavoidable when there is much talk, when we're just quick to speak, when we're just quick to lash out, or when we're just going on and on and on and on and just talking. Sin is unavoidable when there's a lot of talk. It's like we're gonna share the things that they never do, and then that's going to lead into something else, and we're just going to be at each other's throats. We're going to be mad and upset with each other. So first, we've got to listen intently. The second thing is think before we speak. Let's think through it. If we're going to fight fair, let's think through it. Now, notice that each one of these build one on top of the other. See, if we'll listen intently, then we're going to think about what we're going to say. See, if we're slow to listen, then we're going to be quick to speak. If we're slow to listen, we're going to again formulate, and we're going to be quick to combat. So if we'll start with being quick to listen, listening intently, if we'll adopt that, guess what? It's going to become more easier to speak slowly. It's going to become more easier to think about first what we're going to say because we've been listening. And on top of that, it's also going to cause us to be slow to anger or not get angry quickly. Or what I would like to say is keep the temperature down. Got to keep the temperature down. See, because whenever there's conflict, again, feelings and emotions, the temperature is rising. And if we don't keep that temperature down, that temperature is going to rise, and that's where volume rises, and that's where the redness in the face comes out, and that's where, voices get raised, and we're just, getting at each other's throats, and quarreling the verbal may turn into the physical. And guys, you may have that frying pan coming your way, all because we're letting that temperature rise. But here's the thing, is if we'll listen intently, that'll lead to thinking about what we're going to say, what we should say. Ask yourself the question, is what I need to say, does it need to be said? Does it need to be said? What I want to say, does it need to be said? Because that right there, man, if we'll just answer that and we'll just deal with that situation, if we'll just answer that question, that right there will probably resolve the conflict. Because you may say something that's going to result in, again, the fighting and the temperature rising. So listening intently, thinking before we speak, keeping the temperature down, keeping that temperature down, not getting angry quickly. And if we'll do that, if we'll keep that temperature down by, again, speaking or listening intently and thinking through we're not going to get angry quickly. In fact, Proverbs, again, Solomon says this, a hothead stirs up a fight, but one who holds his temper calms disputes. I mean, a hothead, they're ready. Yeah, I'm ready to fight. I'm ready to get into this thing. I'm ready to battle. So if you're a hothead, if it comes easy for you to get angry, I mean, that was me going back to my teenage years. That was me. I had a very short fuse, and it was so easy for me to get angry and to get upset. And then I, saw God changing that in my life, and my wife will tell you one of the things that we agreed on, and this was just individually. We didn't even share this with each other. One of the things that we agreed on is that we would not fight to the extent that we would be yelling at each other, that we would just raise our voices at each other. And we're almost 16 years into this thing, and she'll tell you we've never done that with each other. I mean, that's just by the grace of God. It's just a decision that we've made. Now, yeah, we've had plenty of fights. We've had plenty of disagreements, plenty of things that we disagreed on. And I've said some things at times that hurt her feelings, and she's said some things, and we've had to work through, forgive each other and work through that stuff. But the reality is, if we will keep that temperature down and not be a hothead that's going to stir up a fight, but he who holds his temper will calm the dispute. We'll say, okay, you know what? Let's deal with the problem. Let's deal with the situation. Let's talk it through. Now, in closing, Paul writes something that I want us to think about, especially if we're in a relationship and especially if we're married. Paul writes this in 2 Corinthians 13, verse 5. Notice this. He says, examine yourselves. So often what we want to do is we want to point the finger at our spouse, right? Well, she doesn't do this. If she would get this figured out, she would get this right. If he would get this right, if he would just fix this, and Paul's saying, you examine yourself. In other words, take that finger and point it back at you. Examine yourself to see whether you are still in the Christian faith. Now, Paul is not saying that, examine yourself and see if you're still saved, like see if you're still going to spend eternity with God. He's not talking about that. He's actually talking about the Christian faith from the standpoint of, are you honoring God in your thoughts, in your words, and in your actions? Are you allowing God to influence your life? And put that in perspective of your relationship. Is God influencing you as a husband? Is God influencing you as a wife? Is God influencing you as a man, as a woman? Is God influencing you, or is it that selfishness that's creeping in? Is it your foolishness that's creeping in? Is it our culture's ideas that's creeping in that you're bringing into the relationship that God is saying you're not walking out the Christian faith? That Paul would say, you're not walking out the Christian faith. He says, examine yourselves to see whether you are still in the Christian faith. Test yourselves. Don't you recognize that you are people in whom Jesus Christ lives? Could it be that you're failing the test? And so I want to challenge us this morning that, no doubt, there are some things that need to change about your spouse. There are things that need to change about the person that you're dating, no doubt. But let's also acknowledge that there are things that need to change about us. There need to change things that need to change about us. There's attitudes that need to change about us. There's some things that need to be tweaked in us. There's some things that just need to be thrown out from us. But if we're constantly just looking at and we constantly get upset by everything that our spouse or significant other doesn't do and everything, all their flaws and what they don't do wrong or what they don't do right, we won't look at ourselves and we won't see the change that needs to take place in us. And so I challenge us this morning, I challenge us over the next couple days, next couple weeks, examine yourself and ask yourself this question: what am I contributing to the problem? What's my contribution? What am I contributing to the conflict? What am I contributing to the reason why we're not getting along? The reason why we're not happy? The reason why we're not loving each other? What am I contributing to? Because I guarantee you, I've counseled many, many couples, and there's always two sides to every story. And more than likely, it's very rarely one-sided. It's one does this, the other does that, and if they'll just eliminate it, man, things would work beautifully. Things will go together so well. Things would be awesome. They'll love each other, and all of those things. So ask yourself some of those very, very important questions, and even as we close, ask yourself the question from this day forward: how will I not make selfishness part of my relationship? Because selfishness comes easy, friends. It comes easy to us, and we have to work at not letting it control us, because it's fighting against us. And if it controls us, then we're going to fight with our spouse. We're going to fight with our significant others. We're going to fight with other people. We're going to fight simply because it's all about me. It's my way. So I challenge us to exchange selfishness for selflessness. Just as that wisdom from above comes in and it brings peace, that it brings the fruit of good deeds into our lives and into our relationships. God, I just thank you so much for what you've shared with us this morning, God, and just some of these principles that you've given us that more than likely we've probably known already, but maybe we haven't exercised in a while. Maybe we haven't actually put into practice in a while. And so, God, I pray that first and foremost that we would allow that wisdom that comes from above, that wisdom that comes from you, that we would allow your wisdom. You told James, and James even wrote that if we lack wisdom, all we got to do is ask you for it. And so right now, God, we ask you for wisdom in our life, wisdom in our marriages, wisdom for our families, God, wisdom to make the right decision, the wise decision, the good decision, the good choices, God. We need your wisdom to battle against that selfishness. And Lord, I pray that we would listen intently. And God, I pray that we would think before we speak. And God, that we would keep the temperature down. That you would help us to listen intently. That would lead to that would lead to each one of these things, thinking before we speak and keeping the temperature down. God, we thank you for it, and we give you the praise, the glory, and the honor for what you're doing in our relationships, what you're doing in our marriages, what you will do as we honor your word, just like Solomon loved you, God. Right now, we say with our words, we love you, but not only with our words, God, we want that to be a part of our life, that in loving you, we will follow you, we will obey you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. Let's give him praise this morning.